The unforgiving sun beat down on the dusty streets of Terlingua, Texas, as Matilda Lawson's trembling hands clutched her swollen belly, the wooden auction platform beneath her feet feeling like the gallows of her broken dreams. At 22 years old, she never imagined she would end up here pregnant, alone, and being sold to the highest bidder to cover her late husband's gambling debts. It was June of 1878, and Matilda's world had collapsed around her in mere weeks. Her husband, Thomas, had been dead barely a month, shot in a saloon brawl over cards and whiskey, leaving behind nothing but debt and the unborn child she now carried. His creditors had wasted no time claiming what they believed was rightfully theirs, including her. "Next up, gentlemen, is this fine young woman," the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the small crowd gathered in Terlingua's town square. "Strong back, good for housework, cooking, and whatever else you might fancy. A bit of extra baggage, as you can see," he gestured to her rounded abdomen, drawing cruel laughter from some onlookers. "But in a few months, you'll get yourself a free farmhand to raise up too." Matilda bit her lip to keep from crying out. She knew better than to show emotion now. The men bidding wouldn't care about her tears, and showing weakness would only encourage the worst among them. Her long brown hair fell in waves around her face, providing some small shield from the prying eyes that assessed her value like she was livestock. "Starting bid at $50, the auctioneer continued, squinting against the harsh sunlight. "Who'll give me 50 for this fine specimen?" Matilda scanned the crowd, memorizing the faces of those who would bid on her life. Most were weathered ranch hands or miners looking for a cheap wife. A few were clearly brothel owners eyeing her with calculating stares despite her condition. $50, called a gruff voice from the back. 60, came another bid from her left. 75, said a round man in a fine suit whom Matilda recognized as the owner of the saloon where her husband had died. His smile made her blood run cold. The bids continued climbing, reaching $120 when a voice rang out clearly above the others. $300. The crowd parted, murmurs rippling through the onlookers as a tall figure strode forward. Matilda's eyes locked onto the newcomer, a cowboy she had never seen before. He wore dusty trail clothes, a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt, and his face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Unlike the others, he wasn't leering at her. His gaze was steady and direct. "Well now," the auctioneer stammered, clearly shocked by the bid that more than doubled the previous offer. $300 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear 320? The saloon owner scowled but shook his head. No one else spoke up, going once, going twice. The auctioneer raised his gavel, eyes scanning the silent crowd. "Sold to the gentleman for $300. As the cowboy approached to claim his property, Matilda steeled herself. Would he be better or worse than the others? It hardly mattered now. The cowboy stepped up to the platform, and for the first time, she saw his face clearly, strong jaw covered in stubble, piercing blue eyes that held neither cruelty nor lust, and a small scar above his right eyebrow. He looked to be in his late 20s, with the weathered skin of someone who lived his life under the open sky. He handed the money to the auctioneer, then turned to Matilda. To her surprise, he didn't immediately grab her arm or order her to follow. Instead, he spoke in a low voice meant only for her ears. "Name's Ethan Xavier. I'm getting you out of here." Before she could respond, a voice called out from the crowd, the saloon owner again. "Hey, cowboy, you paying all that for damaged goods? That belly ain't carrying your seed." Several men laughed, but the sound died in their throats as Ethan turned to face them. His hand didn't move toward his holstered pistol, but something in his stance made it clear he would use it if needed. "That baby's mine to protect," he declared, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And any man who has a problem with that can settle it with me directly." No one stepped forward to challenge him. Ethan turned back to Matilda, offering his hand to help her down from the platform. "Can you walk, madam? My wagon's just down the street." Confusion and suspicion warred within her, but with little choice, Matilda accepted his hand and stepped carefully down. "Yes, I can walk," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As they moved through the dispersing crowd, Matilda felt the stares following them. Ethan kept a respectful distance, not touching her beyond their initial contact, but stayed close enough that no one would approach. "Why?" she finally asked as they reached a modest wagon hitched to two sturdy horses. "Why what, madam?" Ethan asked, helping her climb onto the wagon seat. "Why would you spend $300 on a pregnant woman you don't know? What do you want from me?" Suspicion edged her voice. Ethan climbed up beside her, taking the reins before answering. "I knew your husband, Mrs. Lawson. Not well, but enough to know you deserved better than being sold off like cattle." He clicked his tongue, urging the horses forward. "As for what I want, just to help, nothing more." Matilda studied his profile as they left the town behind, trying to read the truth in his words. She had learned the hard way that men rarely gave anything without expecting something in return. Yet something in Ethan Xavier's steady gaze and the set of his jaw made her want to believe him. "Where are we going?" she asked as the dusty streets of Terlingua faded behind them. "My ranch." "It's about 2 hours' ride from here. You'll be safe there." Matilda fell silent, one hand resting protectively on her belly. 5 months along, the child inside her was all she had left in the world. Or at least, it had been until this strange cowboy had appeared from nowhere, claiming her husband's child as his to protect. As the wagon rolled through the rugged Texas landscape, Matilda wondered what new life awaited her, and whether Ethan Xavier would prove to be her salvation, or just another disappointment in a world that had shown her little kindness. The journey to Ethan's ranch passed mostly in silence. Matilda was exhausted, the stress of the auction and the midday heat taking its toll. Occasionally, Ethan would point out landmarks or offer her water from his canteen, but he didn't press her for conversation. "There it is," he finally said as they crested a small hill. Below them stretched a modest ranch, nothing extravagant, but well-maintained. A 2-story wooden house stood near a large barn, with corrals for horses and cattle visible beyond. A small creek cut through the property, providing water and a line of cottonwood trees that offered blessed shade. "It's not much," Ethan said, almost apologetically, "but it's peaceful. Good place for a child to grow up." Matilda tensed at his words. "Mr. Xavier, I still don't understand what you expect from me if you think I'm going to be your wife or—" "No, madam," he interrupted firmly. "Nothing like that. I have a spare room. It's yours for as long as you need it. No strings attached." As they pulled up to the house, an older Mexican woman emerged from the front door, wiping her hands on her apron. "Rosa, this is Mrs. Lawson," Ethan called out as he helped Matilda down from the wagon. "She'll be staying with us for a while." Rosa's dark eyes took in Matilda's condition with a knowing look, but she smiled warmly. "Welcome, Senora. Come inside where it's cooler. You must be thirsty after your journey." Matilda followed Rosa into the house while Ethan took care of the horses. The interior was simple but comfortable, sturdy furniture, clean floors, and windows that allowed for cross breezes. Rosa led her to the kitchen, where she poured cool water from a pitcher. "The patron, he has a good heart," Rosa said as Matilda gratefully accepted the drink. "Too good sometimes, always bringing home strays." "Is that what I am, a stray?" Matilda asked quietly. Rosa smiled. We are all strays in this life, Senora. What matters is finding a safe place to land. She gestured to Matilda's belly. When is the baby due? October, I think. Good, plenty of time to get you strong again. You are too thin for a mother-to-be. Before Matilda could respond, Ethan entered the kitchen. He'd removed his hat and washed the trail dust from his face, revealing hair the color of rich coffee. Rosa, is the blue room ready for Mrs. Lawson? She, patron. I put fresh linens this morning. Perfect. He turned to Matilda. I'll show you upstairs. You must be tired. Matilda followed him up the wooden staircase, her legs aching from standing at the auction block for hours. The second floor had 4 doors leading off a central hallway. This one's yours, Ethan said, opening the second door on the right. Bathrooms at the end of the hall. My room's across the way, and Rosa has the one downstairs near the kitchen. The bedroom was modest but comfortable, with a large bed, a dresser, and a rocking chair near the window that overlooked the hills beyond. It's very nice, Matilda said, not knowing what else to say. After the nightmare of the past weeks, this simple room seemed like unimaginable luxury. Rosa will find you some clothes. We can get proper things from town once you're settled. He hesitated at the door. Supper's at 6, but you should rest. Rosa can bring something up if you'd prefer. Matilda sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. Why are you doing this, Mr. Xavier? The truth, please. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his expression somber. Your husband saved my life once, about 2 years back. Bar fight in El Paso turned ugly. He didn't know me, had no reason to step in, but he did. Took a knife meant for me. He touched his side unconsciously. When I heard what happened to him and then saw you up on that auction block. He shrugged. Figured I owed you both. Thomas never mentioned that, Matilda said softly. No reason he would. Like I said, we weren't friends, just 2 strangers whose paths crossed once. Ethan straightened up. Get some rest, Mrs. Lawson, you're safe here. After he left, Matilda finally allowed her tears to fall. For the first time since Thomas's death, she cried openly for her husband, for the child who would never know its father, for the humiliation of being sold like property, and for the unexpected salvation that had come in the form of this quiet cowboy with kind eyes. When she woke hours later, the sun was setting, painting her room in shades of gold and amber. A clean dress had been laid at the foot of her bed, simple but well made, and a basin of water with soap, and a towel sat on the dresser. After washing and changing, Matilda made her way downstairs, following the aroma of cooking food. In the kitchen, Rosa was stirring a pot of something that smelled delicious, while Ethan sat at the table cleaning a revolver. He quickly put it away when he saw her. Mrs. Lawson, feeling better? Yes, thank you. She hovered awkwardly at the doorway. And please call me Matilda, he nodded. Matilda, then. Come, sit. Rosa's made her famous beef stew. Over dinner, Matilda learned more about the ranch. Ethan raised cattle and horses, nothing too ambitious but enough to make a decent living. Rosa had been with him since he'd bought the place 5 years earlier. She'd come with the house, she joked, having worked for the previous owners too. And there are no other family members. Matilda asked cautiously. No, madam, Ethan replied. Never married. My parents died when I was young, had an uncle who raised me, but he passed on some years back, left me enough to buy this place. After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky. Rosa had retired to her room, leaving them alone with the sounds of night insects and distant coyotes. What will you do after the baby comes? Ethan asked suddenly. Matilda stared into the darkness. I don't know. I have no family either. Thomas and I were heading to California when we stopped in Terlingua. He thought there'd be opportunities there. She sighed. That was before I knew about his gambling, before I knew about a lot of things. You could stay here, Ethan offered, at least until you figure things out. The ranch isn't much, but there's good work, clean air, and no one to bother you. And what would I do? How would I earn my keep? Ethan shrugged. Rosa could use help with the house, and I've been thinking of planting a proper vegetable garden. Beyond that, he looked at her directly. You don't have to earn your right to safety, Matilda. Not everything in this world comes with a price tag. Matilda looked away, unable to meet the sincerity in his gaze. In my experience, Mr. Xavier, everything does have a price. I'm just not always told what it is up front. Ethan, he corrected gently. And I understand your caution. Trust takes time, but I promise you there are no hidden costs here. That night, in the comfort of the blue room, Matilda felt her baby kick strongly, the most vigorous movement she had felt yet. She placed her hand on the spot, smiling despite herself. We might be okay, she whispered to her unborn child. We just might be okay. Over the next few weeks, Matilda gradually adjusted to life on Ethan's ranch. True to his word, he never intruded on her space or made her feel indebted. She began helping Rosa with cooking and household tasks, finding comfort in the routine. Her strength returned as she ate regular meals, and the circles under her eyes faded as she slept soundly without fear for the first time in months. Ethan was often busy with ranch work, leaving at dawn and returning for meals. Sometimes he rode out for days at a time to check on distant parts of his property, or to handle business in neighboring towns. During these absences, Matilda found herself watching the horizon for his return, a fact that both surprised and unsettled her. One morning in late July, Matilda was hanging laundry in the yard when she noticed Ethan by the corral, working with a young horse. She paused to watch him. His movements were patient and gentle as he slowly accustomed the nervous animal to a saddle. There was something compelling about the way he worked, the quiet confidence, the respect he showed even to an animal. When the horse finally accepted the saddle without bucking, Ethan praised it with soft words and gentle pats. Only then did he notice Matilda watching. He smiled and waved her over. "This is Midnight," he said as she approached the fence. "Born here last spring. He's finally ready for proper training." Matilda eyed the glossy black horse warily. "He's beautiful. I've never been comfortable around horses, though. Thomas tried to teach me to ride once, but it didn't go well." "They sense fear," Ethan said, "but they also respond to kindness." He led the horse to the fence. "Here, just let him get to know you, no pressure." Hesitantly, Matilda extended her hand. The horse sniffed her fingers, then nudged her palm gently. "See, he likes you," Ethan said. "Would you like to learn to ride? Properly, I mean. It's a useful skill out here." "Maybe after." She gestured to her growing belly. "Of course." Ethan's eyes lingered on her abdomen for a moment. "How are you feeling? Rosa says you've been eating better." "I have. The baby's very active now." Impulsively, she added, "Would you like to feel? It's kicking right now." Surprise flashed across Ethan's face, followed by something softer. "I'd be honored." Matilda took his calloused hand and placed it where the baby was moving. For a moment, nothing happened, then a strong kick pressed against his palm. Ethan's eyes widened in wonder. "That's amazing," he whispered. Their eyes met over their joined hands, and something shifted between them, a moment of connection that transcended their unusual circumstances. Matilda was the first to break away, suddenly conscious of their proximity. "I should finish the laundry before the wind picks up," she said, stepping back. Ethan nodded, clearing his throat. "And I need to work with this fellow a bit more." He patted the horse's neck. "See you at dinner." "Yes, of course." As July turned to August, the heat became nearly unbearable during midday hours. Matilda took to sitting by the creek in the afternoons. her swollen feet dangling in the cool water. It was there that Ethan found her one day, returning early from checking fence lines. "Mind some company?" he asked, leading his horse to drink upstream. "Not at all." She watched as he unsaddled the animal and let it graze. "How were the fences?" "Good enough. Had to mend a section where some wild cattle pushed through." He sat beside her on the bank, removing his boots to cool his own feet in the water. "Rosa says you've been helping with preserving peaches." "Yes, she's teaching me to make jam. Says we'll need it for winter." Matilda smiled. "She talks as if I'll still be here then." Ethan glanced at her. "Will you be?" Matilda looked down at the water swirling around her ankles. "I don't know. You've been more than generous, but I can't impose forever." "It's not an imposition." He picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. "Truth is, the place runs better with you here. Rosa's happier having someone to talk to besides me and I." He trailed off, seeming to search for words. "And you?" Matilda prompted. "I like having you here," he said simply. "The house feels more like a home now." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the gentle gurgle of the creek and the buzzing of insects in the tall grass. "Tell me about California," Ethan said eventually. "Was that your dream or just Thomas's?" Matilda considered the question. "Both, I suppose." Thomas painted such a picture: orchards and vineyards, mild weather year-round, opportunities for anyone willing to work hard. She sighed. "But I think now it was just another gamble for him, another chance to strike it rich quick." "And what about you? What did you hope to find there?" "A place to belong," she answered honestly. "Somewhere to put down roots. I grew up moving from place to place. My father was a traveling preacher, never stayed anywhere more than a few months." She rubbed her belly absently. "I wanted something different for my own family, stability." Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's why I bought this ranch. After years of drifting, working cattle drives and taking whatever jobs came my way, I wanted something that was mine, something permanent." "You've built something good here," Matilda said sincerely. "It's still missing pieces." Their eyes met again, and this time neither looked away immediately. "Matilda," whatever he was about to say was interrupted by Rosa calling from the house, announcing that dinner was ready. The moment broken, they gathered their things and walked back together, a comfortable silence between them. That night, Matilda lay awake thinking about their conversation by the creek. For the first time since Thomas's death, she was considering a future different from the one she'd planned, a future here, on this ranch, with Ethan and Rosa. The thought both excited and frightened her. She had trusted Thomas, believed in their future together, only to discover after his death that he had gambled away everything they owned and borrowed against money they didn't have. Could she trust again so soon? And more importantly, was she misreading Ethan's kindness as something more? August rolled into September, bringing slightly cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn. Matilda's pregnancy advanced, making movement more difficult, but Rosa watched over her like a mother hen, ensuring she rested and ate properly. Ethan, meanwhile, began preparing the ranch for winter, cutting and storing firewood, repairing the barn roof, and bringing the cattle down from higher pastures. One evening, Ethan returned from town with supplies and a special package for Matilda. "The carpenter finished it," he said, carrying a wooden cradle into the house. He set it down in the living room, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Figured the baby would need somewhere to sleep." Matilda ran her fingers over the smooth wood, noting the careful craftsmanship and the small carved stars adorning the headboard. "Ethan, it's beautiful, but you shouldn't have." "I wanted to," he interrupted. "Besides, every baby needs a proper cradle." Rosa appeared from the kitchen, clapping her hands in delight. "Ah, perfect. Now we need blankets. I will start knitting tomorrow." Looking at their excited faces, Matilda felt a surge of gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you, both of you. I don't know what I would have done without you." "No need for thanks," Ethan said gruffly. "That's what family does." Family. The word hung in the air between them, full of meaning and possibility. Later that week, disaster struck when Ethan was thrown from a horse while working with the cattle. Rosa's son Miguel, who sometimes helped on the ranch, brought him home with a badly gashed leg and possible broken ribs. Matilda took charge immediately, directing Miguel to get Ethan to his bedroom while she gathered medical supplies. "The doctor's away in El Paso," Miguel explained anxiously. "Won't be back for days." "Then we'll manage ourselves," Matilda said with more confidence than she felt. Ethan was pale and sweating when they got him on the bed. The gash on his thigh had soaked his pants with blood. "I'm fine," he insisted through gritted teeth. "Just need to rest a bit." "You're not fine," Matilda countered, cutting away his pant leg to reveal the wound. "This needs cleaning and stitching right away." She turned to Rosa. "Boil water and bring the whiskey from the kitchen cabinet." While Rosa hurried to obey, Matilda examined Ethan's ribs, her hands gentle but sure. "Two broken, I think, the rest just bruised." Ethan watched her through pain-narrowed eyes. "You know what you're doing." "My father treated a lot of people in our travels. I assisted him." She began cleaning the wound with clean cloths. "This will hurt." When Rosa returned with the whiskey, Matilda offered the bottle to Ethan. "Drink as much as you can stand. I need to stitch this closed." He took several long swallows, then nodded grimly. "Do what you need to do." Matilda threaded a needle and, after sterilizing it in the flame of a lamp, began the painful process of closing the wound. Ethan remained stoic throughout, though sweat beaded on his forehead and he occasionally hissed in pain. "Almost done," Matilda murmured as she tied off the last stitch. "You're doing well." Once the wound was bandaged and his ribs bound tightly with strips of clean cloth, Matilda helped him drink water mixed with willow bark that Rosa had prepared for pain. "Rest now," she instructed, pulling a light blanket over him. "I'll check on you through the night." True to her word, Matilda checked on Ethan every few hours, changing his bandages and monitoring for fever. By morning, he was sleeping more peacefully, his color better. When he woke around noon, he found Matilda dozing in a chair beside his bed, one hand protectively on her belly. "Matilda," he called softly. She startled awake immediately. "Ethan, how do you feel?" "Like I got stomped by a bull," he grimaced. "But better than yesterday, thanks to you. You would have done the same for me." She checked his bandages and nodded in satisfaction. "No signs of infection." "You were lucky." "I've got a good angel watching over me," he said, his eyes holding hers. For a week, Matilda and Rosa took turns caring for Ethan as he recovered. Despite his protests, they refused to let him out of bed for the first 3 days, bringing meals to his room and helping him when he needed to move. By the end of the week, he was able to get around with a crutch Rosa's husband had made, though the pain in his ribs still limited his movement. During his convalescence, Matilda spent many hours in his room, reading to him from books in his small collection or simply talking. She told him more about her childhood, traveling with her father from town to town across the frontier. In turn, he shared stories of his years as a cowhand before buying the ranch, including some of the more colorful characters he'd met along the way. One rainy afternoon, as they sat together watching the downpour through his bedroom window, Ethan asked about her marriage. "You don't have to answer," he added quickly, seeing her hesitation. "No, it's all right." Matilda shifted in her chair, trying to find a comfortable position for her increasingly unwieldy body. "We met in Kansas City. I was working as a seamstress after my father died. Thomas came in to have a suit mended. She smiled at the memory. He was so charming, so full of grand plans. He courted me for 3 months before proposing. Were you happy with him? Ethan asked quietly. Matilda considered the question. At first, yes. He was attentive, generous. But there were signs I ignored: the late nights, the unexplained absences, how we always seemed to be moving just when bills came due. She sighed. When I told him about the baby, he seemed genuinely happy. Said we needed to go west, make a fresh start in California. I believed him. It wasn't your fault what happened, Ethan said, wasn't it? I knew something wasn't right, I just didn't want to see it. She looked down at her hands. When he died and those men came to collect their debts, I realized I hadn't really known him at all. And now, Ethan asked, do you still love him? The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. I mourn the man I thought he was, Matilda answered carefully. I'll always be grateful for this child, but I've had to accept that the Thomas I loved may never have really existed. She met Ethan's gaze directly. So no, I don't think I do love him anymore. Not really. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, relief perhaps, or hope. Before he could respond, however, Matilda gasped, her hands flying to her belly. What is it? Are you all right? Ethan struggled to sit up straighter, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Yes, I'm fine, she assured him. The baby just moved very suddenly. Here. Without thinking, she took his hand and placed it where the baby was kicking vigorously. Ethan's face softened in wonder as he felt the movement. Strong little one, he murmured. Yes, Matilda agreed. Like its mother is learning to be. Their eyes met over their joined hands, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first day at the auction block. Matilda's heart raced, and for once she didn't look away. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull back, Ethan leaned forward and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief but tender, a question more than a demand. When he pulled back, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. I shouldn't have. Matilda silenced him by leaning in to return the kiss, her hand still holding his against her belly where their futures kicked impatiently between them. As September gave way to October, the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Ethan's leg healed enough for him to resume light duties, though he still walked with a slight limp. Miguel and 2 other ranch hands took over the more strenuous work, preparing the herd for the coming winter. Matilda, now in her 9th month, focused on preparing the house and herself for the baby's arrival. The relationship between Matilda and Ethan evolved cautiously. They shared more kisses and quiet moments together, but both were careful not to rush. Matilda was still healing from the betrayal of her first marriage, and Ethan respected her need for time. For her part, Matilda was determined not to make the same mistakes again. She would know this man fully before giving him her heart completely. Rosa watched their growing closeness with approving eyes but kept her comments to herself, save for a knowing smile now and then. She busied herself with preparing for the baby, knitting blankets and tiny clothes, and ensuring the house was stocked with everything they might need when the time came. One crisp October morning, Matilda woke with an unfamiliar ache in her lower back. She moved carefully through her morning routine, not wanting to alarm anyone, but by midday, the pain had intensified and begun to come in waves. She found Rosa in the kitchen, preparing lunch. I think it's time, she said simply. One hand braced against the doorframe as another pain washed over her. Rosa immediately took charge. To bed with you now. I will get everything ready and send Miguel for the midwife. She helped Matilda upstairs, calling instructions to the ranch hand who was chopping wood outside. What about Ethan? Matilda asked between breaths as Rosa helped her change into a clean nightgown. Miguel will find him after he gets the midwife. He rode to the north pasture this morning. Rosa settled Matilda on the bed, tucking pillows behind her back. First babies often take their time. He will be back before anything happens. But the baby had other ideas. Matilda's labor progressed rapidly, and by the time the midwife arrived 2 hours later, the contractions were coming hard and fast. "This little one's in a hurry," the midwife, Mrs. Bennet, observed as she examined Matilda. "Won't be long now." Matilda gripped Rosa's hand through another contraction. "Ethan, Miguel will find him," Rosa assured her again, wiping Matilda's brow with a cool cloth. "Focus on your baby now." The next hours passed in a blur of pain and exertion for Matilda. Mrs. Bennet and Rosa coached her through each contraction, their calm voices anchoring her as waves of agony threatened to sweep her away. The sun was low in the sky when Mrs. Bennet finally announced that it was time to push. "I can't," Matilda gasped, exhausted beyond measure. "I can't do it." "Yes, you can," Rosa insisted, supporting her shoulders. "You are the strongest woman I know. Push now." With a cry that seemed torn from her very soul, Matilda gathered her remaining strength and pushed. The world narrowed to this single purpose, this final effort to bring her child into the world, and then, suddenly, it was over. A new cry filled the room, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Matilda collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face. "A boy," Mrs. Bennet announced, quickly cleaning and wrapping the infant. "A fine, healthy boy." She placed the swaddled bundle in Matilda's trembling arms. Matilda stared down at her son's tiny red face, overcome with a love so profound it felt like her heart might burst from it. "Hello," she whispered, tracing a finger along his downy cheek. "I'm your mama." The baby's cries quieted as he seemed to study her with unfocused eyes. His tiny hand escaped the blanket and wrapped around her finger with surprising strength. "He knows you," Rosa said softly, tears in her own eyes. "Already he knows his mother." Mrs. Bennet bustled around, cleaning up and checking Matilda for any complications. "Everything looks good," she pronounced. "You did wonderfully, Mrs. Lawson." A commotion downstairs announced Ethan's arrival. His footsteps pounded up the stairs and he appeared in the doorway, breathless and wide-eyed. "Am I too late? Is she—" He stopped abruptly at the sight of Matilda holding the baby. "Not too late," Matilda smiled tiredly. "Come meet him." Ethan approached the bed cautiously, his eyes never leaving the small bundle. Rosa and Mrs. Bennet discreetly left the room, closing the door behind them. "A boy?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. "Yes." Matilda shifted the baby so Ethan could see his face. "Would you like to hold him?" Ethan hesitated, then carefully took the infant in his arms. His large hands looked enormous against the tiny swaddled form, but he held the baby with instinctive gentleness. "He's perfect," he murmured, awe in his voice. The baby yawned, causing Ethan to chuckle. "Strong lungs too, I bet." "The strongest," Matilda confirmed, watching them together with a full heart. Ethan returned the baby to her arms, then sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry I wasn't here." "You're here now." She reached for his hand. "That's what matters." He squeezed her fingers, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Have you thought about names?" Matilda looked down at her son. "I was thinking James after my father." "James," Ethan repeated. "It suits him." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching as baby James drifted to sleep in his mother's arms. Outside, the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, painting the room in warm light, a fitting welcome for a new life on this day of beginnings. Later that evening, after Matilda and the baby had both been tended to and were resting comfortably, Ethan returned to the bedroom with a tray of food Rosa had prepared. "You need to eat," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Rosa's orders." Matilda smiled, shifting carefully to sit up straighter against the pillows. James slept peacefully in the cradle Ethan had commissioned, placed right beside the bed. "She's right, as usual." Matilda accepted the bowl of hearty stew Ethan offered. "I'm famished." As she ate, Ethan moved the rocking chair closer to the bed and sat watching over both her and the baby. There was something different about him tonight, a calm certainty in his manner that hadn't been there before. "What are you thinking?" Matilda asked when she'd finished eating. "I'm thinking about the day I saw you on that auction block," he replied. "How scared you looked, how brave." "I didn't feel brave," she admitted. "I was terrified. But you kept your dignity. You didn't beg or cry, even when those men were bidding on you like you were property." His eyes were intense. "I knew then that you were someone special. Is that why you bid on me? Because I didn't cry, partly, and because I couldn't stand the thought of you going to any of those men." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "But mostly it was something in your eyes. A strength that all your fear couldn't hide. I wanted to know the woman who had that kind of strength." Matilda felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze. "And now that you know me, now I know I was right." He reached out to take her hand. "Matilda, I don't want to rush you. I know you're still healing from everything that happened with Thomas, and now you have James to think about. But I want you to know that he paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I love you, both of you." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Matilda looked down at their joined hands, processing his words and the emotions they stirred within her. "When Thomas died, I thought my life was over," she said softly. "Then those men came for their debts, and I knew it was worse than over. It was going to be a nightmare I couldn't escape." She squeezed his hand. "But then you appeared, like something from a dream instead of a nightmare. You gave me safety when I had none, asked for nothing in return, and showed me what a good man truly is." She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "I love you too, Ethan. I think I have for some time now." The joy that spread across his face at her words made her heart swell. He leaned forward to kiss her gently, mindful of her exhaustion. From the cradle, James made a small sound, drawing both their attention. Ethan moved to check on him, adjusting the blanket with a tenderness that brought tears to Matilda's eyes. "I meant what I said that day at the auction," he said, looking down at the sleeping infant. "This baby is mine to protect. If you'll let me, I want to be his father in every way that matters." "I would like that very much," Matilda whispered. "We both would." 2 weeks after James's birth, on a perfect autumn day with clear skies and gentle breezes, Matilda stood beside Ethan in the small church in Terlingua. Rosa held baby James, wrapped in a beautiful blanket she had knitted, while the minister spoke the words that joined Matilda and Ethan as husband and wife. It was a simple ceremony, attended only by Rosa and her family, Mrs. Bennett the midwife, and a few of the ranch hands who had come to respect Matilda during her time at the ranch. But for Matilda, it was perfect, honest, and true, like the man who now placed a simple gold band on her finger. "I take you, Matilda, as my lawfully wedded wife," Ethan said, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." As Matilda repeated the vows, she marveled at how much her life had changed in just a few short months. From the depths of despair on that auction platform to this moment of joy, it seemed almost unbelievable. Yet the warmth of Ethan's hands holding hers and the love in his eyes as he looked at her were undeniably real. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. You may kiss your bride." Ethan's kiss was gentle but full of promise of a future filled with love, stability, and family. When they turned to face their small gathering of well-wishers, Matilda's heart felt so full it might burst. Rosa stepped forward with James, who was awake and looking around with curious eyes. "Your son wants to congratulate you," she said, carefully transferring the baby to Matilda's arms. Ethan wrapped an arm around Matilda's shoulders, looking down at James with unmistakable paternal pride. "Hello there, little man. It's official now, we're a family." The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with food prepared by Rosa and her daughters. The house was filled with laughter and conversation, a marked contrast to the quiet it had known before Matilda's arrival. As evening approached, the guests gradually departed, leaving the new family to their first night together as husband and wife. Rosa was the last to leave, kissing Matilda's cheek and whispering, "God has blessed this house at last. Be happy, Miss Queridos." After she left, Ethan and Matilda stood on the porch watching the sunset, James sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. The ranch spread out before them, their land, their home, their future. "No regrets?" Ethan asked quietly, his arm around her waist. Matilda leaned her head against his shoulder. "None. Everything that happened, even the worst of it, led me here. How could I regret that?" They stayed there until the first stars appeared, their silver light blessing the beginning of their life together. Winter came to the ranch, bringing cold winds and occasional snow flurries that dusted the landscape like sugar. Inside the warm house, life settled into a pleasant rhythm. James grew quickly, delighting his parents with each new accomplishment, his first real smile, the strength in his grip when he clutched his father's finger, the way he tracked movement with increasingly focused eyes. Ethan proved to be a natural father, as gentle with his son as he was with his most skittish horses. He would spend evenings holding James, telling him stories about the ranch and the animals, promises of future rides and adventures when he was older. Matilda often found herself pausing in her tasks just to watch them together, her heart full to bursting with love for them both. Christmas approached, bringing with it Matilda's first real experience of a family holiday. Growing up, her father had considered Christmas primarily a religious observance, with little room for the traditions others enjoyed. Thomas had spent their only Christmas together gambling in a saloon, leaving her alone with a small, undecorated tree and unfulfilled promises. But this year would be different. Rosa taught her to make traditional Mexican Christmas dishes, while Ethan and Miguel cut a perfect pine from the foothills and set it up in the corner of the living room. "We need decorations," Matilda declared, surveying the bare tree. "I'll go to town tomorrow and see what Mr. Peterson has in his store." "Why buy them when we can make them?" Ethan suggested. "My uncle and I used to string popcorn and cranberries, carve little figures from wood, that sort of thing." So they spent evenings by the fire, creating ornaments from simple materials found around the ranch. Matilda sewed tiny stockings from scraps of fabric and fashioned stars from bits of tin. Ethan whittled small horses, cattle, and birds that they hung with twine. Rosa contributed paper flowers and crosses woven from straw on Christmas Eve. They lit candles on the tree, carefully supervised, and stepped back to admire their work. The homemade decorations caught the light, transforming the simple pine into something magical. "It's beautiful," Matilda whispered, holding James so he could see the lights. The baby stared at the tree, mesmerized by the flickering candles. "First of many," Ethan promised, his arm around her shoulders. "Wait until he's old enough to help decorate next year." That night, after placing carefully wrapped gifts beneath the tree, a new shawl for Matilda, a hand-tooled leather wallet for Ethan, toys for James, and special items for Rosa and her family. They tucked their son into his cradle and retired to their bedroom. In the quiet darkness, lying in Ethan's arms, Matilda reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. This time last year, I was newly married to Thomas, still believing in all his promises, she mused. I could never have imagined where I'd be now. Are you happy? Ethan asked, his fingers gently stroking her hair. Happier than I've ever been. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him in the moonlight streaming through the window. You saved me, Ethan, not just from that auction block, but from giving up on trust, on love. You saved yourself, he corrected. I just gave you a safe place to do it. He traced the curve of her cheek. You're the strongest person I know, Matilda Xavier. She smiled at the still new sound of her married name. I love you, Ethan Xavier. And I love you. He pulled her down for a kiss that quickly deepened, their bodies coming together in the familiar dance they had perfected in the weeks since their wedding. Later, drifting toward sleep in each other's arms, Matilda whispered, I have an extra gift for you tomorrow. What's that? Ethan mumbled sleepily. You'll have to wait and see, she teased, knowing the news of another baby on the way would be the perfect Christmas surprise. Spring came to the ranch in a riot of wildflowers and new growth. James, now 6 months old, was sitting up on his own and babbling constantly, much to his parents' delight. Matilda's second pregnancy was progressing well, her belly just beginning to show beneath her dresses. The announcement at Christmas had indeed been Ethan's favorite gift, and he was even more protective and attentive this time around, having missed the early months of her pregnancy with James. One sunny April afternoon, as Matilda sat on a blanket in the yard watching James play with blocks Ethan had carved for him, a wagon approached the ranch house. She shaded her eyes, trying to identify the visitors. Ethan emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth as he walked over to join her. Expecting anyone? No, she replied, gathering James into her arms as a precaution. As the wagon drew closer, Matilda could make out 2 men and a woman. Something about the lead man's posture seemed vaguely familiar, sending an inexplicable chill down her spine. Ethan stepped forward as the wagon stopped in the yard. Afternoon, folks. Can I help you? The driver, a hard-faced man in his 50s with a silver-streaked beard, looked past Ethan to where Matilda stood with James. His eyes narrowed with recognition. Well, looks like the rumors were true, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. Thomas Lawson's widow, living high on the hog with a new husband already. Matilda felt the blood drain from her face. Mr. Blackstone. The name made Ethan stiffen. Samuel Blackstone had been Thomas's main creditor, the man who had arranged the auction after his death. You remember me? Good. Blackstone climbed down from the wagon, followed by a younger man who bore a strong resemblance to him and a sharp-faced woman. This here's my son Jeremiah and my sister Ida. We've come to claim what's ours. Ethan moved to stand slightly in front of Matilda. There's nothing here that belongs to you, Blackstone. Mrs. Lawson's debts were settled when I purchased her contract at auction. Blackstone's smile didn't reach his eyes. Oh, but that's where you're wrong, Xavier. See, I've recently acquired some information that changes things considerably. What information? Matilda asked, clutching James closer to her chest. Thomas Lawson had valuable property that he kept hidden from his creditors, property that legally should have been used to settle his debts. Blackstone reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. This here's a deed to a gold mine claim near Sacramento. Worth a damn sight more than what your husband owed me, but I'm willing to be reasonable. A mine. Matilda shook her head in confusion. That's impossible. Thomas didn't own anything like that. Oh, but he did. Blackstone unfolded the paper. Registered in his name 6 months before his death, and since you were his wife, legally the claim passed to you upon his death. Ethan took a step toward the man. Even if that's true, which I doubt, Matilda doesn't owe you anything. The auction settled all debts. The auction settled what we knew about at the time, Blackstone countered. This is newly discovered property, and according to territorial law, the widow is still responsible for all debts that can be satisfied by the deceased's estate. He refolded the paper. I'm not an unreasonable man. Sign over the claim to me, and we'll call it square. Matilda exchanged a glance with Ethan, seeing the same suspicion in his eyes that she felt. May I see the deed? Blackstone hesitated, then handed it over with obvious reluctance. Matilda studied it carefully, noting the official-looking stamps and Thomas's familiar signature. It appeared genuine, though she was no expert. Even if this is real, she said slowly, I don't see how I could sign it over. I'd need to consult a lawyer first. Blackstone's pleasant facade slipped slightly. No need for lawyers. Simple transaction between parties. Sign it now and we'll be on our way. No, Ethan said firmly, taking the paper from Matilda and returning it to Blackstone. If you have a legitimate claim, you can present it through proper legal channels. Until then, I'll thank you to leave our property. The younger Blackstone stepped forward menacingly, but his father held up a hand to stop him. No need for unpleasantness. Yet. His eyes flicked to James, then to Matilda's slightly rounded belly. Nice family you're building here, Xavier. Be a shame if anything happened to disrupt it. Ethan's hand moved toward the gun at his hip. That sounds like a threat. Just an observation. Blackstone smiled thinly. We'll be staying in Terlingua for a few days. Town hotel. Think over our offer. I'm sure you'll see reason. With that, the 3 visitors returned to their wagon and departed, leaving a cloud of dust and unease in their wake. As soon as they were out of sight, Matilda sank onto the porch steps, her legs suddenly weak. Ethan, what if it's true? What if Thomas really did have a gold mine? Ethan sat beside her, his expression troubled. I don't know, but something doesn't smell right about this. Why would Blackstone come all the way from Terlingua to settle this privately instead of going through a court? And how did he find you? Someone must have talked, Matilda said, bouncing James gently as he began to fuss. News travels fast, even between towns. Ethan nodded grimly. I'm riding into town tomorrow to wire Judge Parker in El Paso. He'll know if this claim is legitimate and what our legal position is. That night, after putting James to bed, Matilda and Ethan discussed the situation further. Neither slept well, both troubled by Blackstone's veiled threats and the possibility that Thomas had kept such a significant secret. The next morning, Ethan rode to town while Miguel and the other hands kept watch over the ranch. Matilda tried to go about her daily routine, but anxiety made her jumpy and distracted. What if Thomas really had owned a valuable mine? And if he had, why hadn't he used it to pay his debts instead of gambling away what little they had? Ethan returned late in the afternoon, his expression grim. I sent the wire to Judge Parker. It'll be a few days before we hear back. He washed up at the kitchen pump before continuing. I also asked around town. Blackstone and his family checked into the hotel yesterday. They've been telling anyone who'll listen that you're a thief trying to cheat them out of their rightful property. That's ridiculous, Matilda exclaimed. I didn't even know about any mine until yesterday. I know that, and so do most folks in town who matter. No one's taking Blackstone's side yet, but he's stirring up trouble. Ethan dried his hands on a towel. Sheriff Madison says he'll keep an eye on them, but there's not much he can do unless they break the law. What should we do? For now, Wait for word from Judge Parker. In the meantime, no one goes anywhere alone. Ethan's expression softened as he took in her worried face. Don't worry too much. We'll sort this out. 2 anxious days passed with no further contact from the Blackstones and no reply from Judge Parker. Matilda kept James close, rarely venturing beyond the yard. Ethan and the hands took turns keeping watch, especially at night. On the 3rd day, Rosa burst into the kitchen where Matilda was preparing lunch, her face ashen. Riders coming, many men with Senor Blackstone. Ethan, who had been repairing tack in the adjacent room, immediately went for his rifle. How many, Rosa? 6, maybe 7, she replied, wringing her hands. They have guns, patron. Get upstairs with Matilda and James, Ethan ordered, checking his weapon. Miguel and I will handle this. Ethan, no, Matilda protested. It's too dangerous. Let's all leave, ride to town, and get the sheriff. No time, he said grimly. Besides, I won't be driven off my own land by threats. He kissed her quickly. Go upstairs, bar the door, and don't come out until I call you. Reluctantly, Matilda gathered James and followed Rosa upstairs to the bedroom, where they closed the heavy oak door and pushed a dresser against it. Through the window, she could see Blackstone and his men approaching a much larger group than had come before, all armed and looking purposeful. Ethan and Miguel stood on the porch, rifles ready but not aimed. Matilda cracked the window slightly to hear the exchange. That's far enough, Blackstone, Ethan called as the riders approached the yard. State your business. Blackstone reined in his horse, the others stopping behind him. My business is with your wife, Xavier. She still has something that belongs to me. We're waiting to hear from the judge about the legality of your claim, Ethan replied evenly. Until then, there's nothing to discuss. See, that's where you're wrong. Blackstone gestured, and his men spread out slightly, their hands near their weapons. I've been patient, but my patience is running out. I want that deed signed over today, or things are going to get unpleasant. From her vantage point, Matilda could see Ethan's shoulders tense, though his voice remained calm. You're threatening a man on his own property, Blackstone. That's not a wise move. Threatening. Blackstone's laugh was cold. No, just explaining the situation. Either the widow signs over what rightfully should have been mine months ago, or we'll take matters into our own hands. Before Ethan could respond, the thunder of approaching hooves drew everyone's attention. Sheriff Madison rode into the yard, accompanied by 3 deputies and, to Matilda's surprise, Judge Parker himself. What's going on here, Blackstone? The sheriff demanded, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. Blackstone's confident expression faltered slightly. Just having a discussion about a business matter, Sheriff. Nothing that concerns you. 7 armed men confronting 2 looks like more than a discussion to me, the sheriff observed dryly. Judge Parker here has something you might want to hear. The judge, a dignified man in his 60s, urged his horse forward. Mr. Blackstone, I've received some interesting information regarding your claim on the Lawson mine. It seems the deed you're so eager to acquire has already been recorded as null and void. What? Blackstone's face flushed with anger. That's impossible. Not at all, the judge continued calmly. 3 months before his death, Thomas Lawson sold his interest in that mine to his partner, a Mr. Wells from San Francisco. The transaction was properly recorded in Sacramento. The deed you possess is worthless. Matilda gasped softly. This was the first she'd heard of any mine or partner. Had Thomas received money from this sale? If so, where had it gone? Below, Blackstone was sputtering in disbelief. No, that can't be right. I have the deed right here. A deed that was superseded by the sale. Judge Parker cut him off. Whether you were unaware of this fact or deliberately trying to deceive Mrs. Xavier is not for me to determine now. But I do know this. You have no legal claim on her or any property connected to her late husband. Blackstone's face contorted with fury. For a moment, it seemed he might order his men to attack despite the presence of the law, but after a tense silence, he spat on the ground. "This isn't over," he growled, then wheeled his horse around. "Mount up, boys." As Blackstone and his men rode away, Matilda clutched James to her chest in relief. She hurried downstairs, Rosa following close behind. "Ethan," she called, rushing into his arms the moment she reached the porch. "It's all right," he murmured, holding her and James close. "They're gone now." Sheriff Madison approached them. "Thought you might need some help when I saw Blackstone gathering men in town. Lucky the judge arrived when he did with that information from California." "Very lucky," Ethan agreed, shaking both men's hands gratefully. "Thank you both." Judge Parker smiled kindly at Matilda. "Mrs. Xavier, I'm sorry about this unpleasantness. Rest assured Blackstone won't bother you again. I've issued an order barring him from approaching you or your property." "Thank you, Judge," Matilda said sincerely. "But I don't understand Thomas sold a mine. I never knew he owned one, let alone sold it." The judge's expression grew troubled. "That's the other matter I came to discuss with you. It appears your late husband received $15,000 for his share of the mine. The banker in Sacramento confirmed the funds were transferred to a bank in Kansas City 4 months before Mr. Lawson's death." Matilda felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. 15,000. But we were practically penniless when he died. Where did all that money go? "I'm afraid I can't answer that, Mrs. Xavier," the judge said gently. "But given what we know of your husband's habits—" "He gambled it away," Matilda finished, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "All of it. Enough money to set us up for life, to provide for his child, and he gambled it away without ever telling me it existed." Ethan's arm tightened around her waist, supporting her as the full magnitude of Thomas's betrayal became clear. "I'm truly sorry," Judge Parker said, "but at least you can rest easy knowing that Blackstone has no claim on you or your family now." After the sheriff and judge departed, promising to ensure Blackstone and his associates left the area, Ethan led Matilda to the porch swing. They sat in silence for a while, James dozing in Matilda's arms, both processing the day's revelations. "I can't believe he had all that money," Matilda finally said, her voice hollow. "We were living in a one-room shack wearing patched clothes and all that time." "Try not to dwell on it," Ethan advised gently. "The past is past. What matters is that you and James are safe now and our future is secure." Matilda nodded slowly. "You're right, it's just, I thought I'd come to terms with who Thomas really was, but this—" She shook her head. "It's like losing him all over again, only this time it's the last illusions I had about our marriage." Ethan took her hand. "Sometimes the hardest ghosts to lay to rest are the ones we create ourselves, the images we hold of people that don't match who they really were." "When did you get so wise?" Matilda asked, managing a small smile. "Learned it from my wife," he replied, returning her smile. "She's quite extraordinary, you know." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across their land, Matilda felt a sense of closure wash over her. Thomas and his deceptions were truly part of the past now. Her future with Ethan, with James, and with the new baby growing within her was what mattered. "I love you," she said simply, leaning her head against Ethan's shoulder. "I love you too," he replied, his arm secure around her. "Both of you." "All three of you," he corrected, his free hand gently touching her rounded belly. In that peaceful moment, with the immediate threat gone and the truth finally revealed, Matilda felt truly free for the first time since Thomas's death. Not just free from debt or obligation, but free from the shadow of her first marriage and all its painful deceptions. As summer blossomed across the ranch, life settled back into its pleasant rhythm. The Blackstones had left the territory, warned by Judge Parker never to return. Matilda's pregnancy progressed well, her belly growing rounder as the baby within grew stronger. James celebrated his first birthday with a small party attended by Rosa's family and a few neighbors, delighting everyone by taking his first unsteady steps that very day. Ethan expanded the ranch operations, buying additional cattle and hiring 2 more hands. The future looked promising, with good rains ensuring lush grazing land and healthy livestock. For Matilda, watching her husband work the land he loved and their son grow more adventurous by the day, it was a time of contentment and anticipation. One hot August afternoon, as Matilda rested in the shade of the porch with James playing nearby, a lone rider approached the ranch. Unlike Blackstone's threatening arrival, this visitor came openly, at a leisurely pace that suggested no ill intent. Ethan emerged from the barn, wiping sweat from his brow as he walked over to join Matilda. "Expecting anyone?" "No," she replied, watching curiously as the rider drew closer. As the stranger reached the yard and dismounted, Matilda could see it was a woman middle-aged, well-dressed in traveling clothes, with a composed, intelligent face. She removed her riding gloves and approached the house with a tentative smile. "Mrs. Lawson," she called. "Or I suppose it's Mrs. Xavier now." Matilda exchanged a puzzled glance with Ethan before responding. "Yes, I'm Matilda Xavier. Can I help you?" The woman came closer, stopping at the foot of the porch steps. "My name is Ethan Wells. My husband was Benjamin Wells, Thomas Lawson's business partner in California." Matilda straightened, immediately alert. "Mrs. Wells, please come up and sit. It's too hot to stand in the yard." She introduced Ethan, who nodded politely but remained watchful. Ethan Wells settled into a chair, gratefully accepting the glass of lemonade Rosa brought out. "Thank you. It's been a long journey from Sacramento." "What brings you all this way, Mrs. Wells?" Ethan asked directly. The woman took a sip of her drink before answering. "I came to find you, Mrs. Xavier. When Judge Parker contacted my husband's solicitor regarding the mine, we learned of Thomas's death and your circumstances thereafter." She looked genuinely distressed. "I was horrified to hear what happened to you." "That's very kind," Matilda said cautiously, "but it's all in the past now." "Perhaps, but there's a matter that needs resolving." Elena reached into her reticule and withdrew an envelope. "My husband passed away 3 months ago, heart failure. Before he died, he had become concerned about the mine transaction with Thomas." "Concerned how?" Ethan asked, his posture tense. "Ben suspected Thomas might have been coerced into selling his share well below its value," Elena explained. "Thomas was in desperate need of funds, gambling debts. Ben assumed, and Ben took advantage of that to purchase his half of the claim for less than it was worth. It bothered his conscience greatly in his final days." Matilda blinked in surprise. "But the judge said Thomas received $15,000. That seems substantial." "The claim was worth closer to $50,000 at the time," Elena said simply. "Its value has only increased since. Ben left instructions in his will to make amends." She handed the envelope to Matilda. "This is a bank draft for $20,000, representing the additional amount Thomas should have received, plus interest. It's yours now." Matilda stared at the envelope in shock, unable to speak. Ethan leaned forward, his expression skeptical. "That's very generous, Mrs. Wells, but why? You had no obligation to do this." Elena's smile was sad. "My husband built his fortune on being shrewd, sometimes ruthlessly so." But he was a good man at heart, and he wanted to die with a clear conscience. Making this right was important to him. She looked at Matilda directly. And when I learned what happened to you after Thomas's death, being sold at auction while carrying his child, I knew Ben had made the right decision. That money should have provided for you and your son. Matilda finally found her voice. I don't know what to say. This is unexpected. You don't need to say anything, Elena assured her. The money is yours, no strings attached. Use it for your children, your ranch, whatever will make your lives better. She glanced at James, who was watching her curiously from his play area. He has his father's eyes. Yes, Matilda said softly, looking at her son with a bittersweet smile. He does. Elena stayed for dinner, sharing stories of the mining business in California and her plans to return to her family in Boston now that her husband was gone. She was gracious and unassuming, genuinely pleased to see that Matilda had found happiness despite the hardships she had endured. After their visitor departed the next morning, continuing her journey east, Matilda and Ethan sat on the porch swing, the bank draft still in its envelope between them. $20,000, Ethan said, shaking his head in disbelief. That's more money than most people see in a lifetime. It doesn't feel real, Matilda admitted. After everything that happened with Thomas, to have this come from his business dealings, it's like the final chapter of a story I thought was already finished. What do you want to do with it? Ethan asked. Matilda considered the question carefully. Some should go into a trust for James and the new baby. Education, their future needs. Agreed, Ethan nodded. And the rest? A slow smile spread across Matilda's face as an idea formed. What would you think about expanding the ranch, not just more cattle, but maybe breeding horses too? You've always said Midnight has exceptional bloodlines. Ethan's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. It would take time, investment, but with proper breeding stock and a good reputation. He grinned. Xavier Horse Ranch has a nice ring to it. It does, Matilda agreed, and perhaps a larger house too. Not extravagant, but with room for our growing family. I like how you think, Mrs. Xavier. Ethan pulled her close, his hand resting gently on her rounded belly. A fresh start, built on our own terms. Exactly. Matilda leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. Not Thomas's money or Thomas's plans, but ours. A future we create together. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Matilda gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Elena Rose, honoring both Mrs. Wells and Rosa, who had become family in all but blood. Unlike James's hurried entry into the world, Elena's birth was calm and controlled, with Ethan present throughout, holding Matilda's hand and whispering encouragement. When the midwife placed the tiny, red-faced infant in Matilda's arms, she felt her heart expand yet again, this miraculous capacity to love another child completely without diminishing her love for James or Ethan. She's beautiful, Ethan murmured, gently touching his daughter's downy head. Perfect, just like her mother. James, now 15 months old and curious about everything, was brought in to meet his sister. He studied the baby with serious eyes, then patted her blanket gently, making both parents smile. That's right, James, Matilda said softly. This is your sister, Elena. You'll help us take care of her, won't you? The toddler nodded solemnly, as if understanding the responsibility being placed upon him. In the weeks that followed, as Matilda recovered and Elena grew stronger, plans for the ranch's expansion began to take shape. Ethan traveled to San Antonio to consult with a renowned horse breeder, returning with ideas and contacts. A well-respected architect visited to discuss designs for expanding the house, incorporating Matilda's wishes for a larger kitchen, more bedrooms, and a dedicated nursery. As Christmas approached once again, marking a full year since Ethan and Matilda had acknowledged their love for each other, the ranch hummed with activity. Construction on the house addition had begun, with the framework already in place. In the spring, the first new breeding mares would arrive, carefully selected for their bloodlines and temperament on Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside, a rare occurrence in that part of Texas. The family gathered in the warm living room. James toddled around the Christmas tree, fascinated by the ornaments, while Alina slept peacefully in her cradle nearby. Rosa had gone to her daughter's home for the holiday, leaving Ethan and Matilda alone with their children for the first time since Alina's birth. "Happy?" Ethan asked, bringing Matilda a cup of hot cocoa as she sat watching the children. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe this is really my life now." Ethan sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "Remember that day at the auction block, when I said the baby was mine to protect? Of course. It was the first moment I felt hope in weeks. I meant it, even then," he said quietly. "But I had no idea how much more it would come to mean that James would truly become my son in my heart, that we would have Alina, that we would build this life together. When Thomas died, I thought my story was ending," Matilda reflected. "I couldn't imagine a future beyond survival. But it wasn't an ending at all, just the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "A much better one." Ethan kissed her gently. "And we have many more chapters ahead of us, my love, many more." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, nature's way of marking endings and beginnings, the cleansing of the old to make way for the new. Inside, by the warmth of the fire, Matilda Xavier held her husband's hand and watched their children, her heart full of gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought her here, from the desperate woman on the auction block to the beloved wife and mother she had become. The baby who had once been mine to protect, in the words of a stranger, was now their son, secure in the love of both his parents. The ranch that had been a refuge was now truly home. And the future, once so uncertain, stretched before them like the Texas horizon, vast, promising, and filled with possibilities.